Welcome back to Us Mint Mysteries. Today, we're diving into something that might just change the way you look at those old, rough, worn-out Lincoln Wheat Pennies hiding in jars and boxes across America. Most people toss these bad-condition pennies aside. But what if I told you that a few of them, even scratched, dark, or heavily circulated, could still be worth a life-changing fortune? I'm talking staggering prices that leave collectors speechless and ordinary people in total disbelief. So make sure you watch every second, because the next coin show you might be sitting in your home right now. Coin number 1 takes us deep into the heart of World War II, because in your hands, you may be holding a 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny that doesn't look like much at first glance. In fact, this one has that dark, almost black shade that so many collectors overlook. The surface looks aged, worn, and softened from decades of circulation. Most people would pass it by without a second thought. But that's where the magic happens, because the 1944 Wheat Penny, even in fine condition, carries mysteries that can turn a simple pocket piece into a jaw-dropping treasure. Let's start with what makes the 1944 penny so interesting. This coin was supposed to be struck in regular bronze, made of copper, tin, and zinc. But as America was coming out of the 1943 steel penny experiment, when the mint used steel because copper was needed for ammunition, some leftover steel planchets remained in the machines. And because of that simple mistake, a tiny handful of 1944 pennies were accidentally struck on steel. Those mistakes are some of the most sought-after error coins in U.S. history. Now, your coin shows that deep black shade. And that's important. Many steel pennies turn dark over time, especially when they age inside old storage boxes, basements, or humid areas. Bronze pennies usually turn brown, red-brown, or dark brown, but steel pennies can oxidize into a darker, almost black tone. And that's where the thrill begins, because even in fine condition, a 1944 steel penny can bring a value that leaves collectors stunned. But let's slow down and look at yours more closely. In fine condition, the details on Lincoln's hair and coat are soft, but still visible. The date, 1944, stands clear, and the lettering across the rim stands strong enough to read without struggle. The wheat stalks on the reverse are worn, but not flat, showing just enough definition to remind us how long this coin has traveled. This kind of wear tells a story. A coin touched by workers, soldiers, families, and generations who never imagined it might one day be worth a fortune. Now, let's talk value, because this is where the wow factor hits hard. A regular 1944 bronze penny in fine condition is normally worth a few cents, maybe $1 or $2 to a collector. But if this coin, even with its dark, blackened surface, turns out to be struck on steel, the value jumps from pocket change to the kind of price collectors chase for a lifetime. A confirmed 1944 steel penny, even in worn condition, has sold for over $110,000. And that's the low end. In higher grades, these coins have hit $350,000, $450,000, and some estimates push them beyond $500,000. For the cleanest examples, imagine that a penny most people throw away, suddenly worth more than a luxury home. So, how can someone identify a valuable 1944 steel penny? The first test is simple: a magnet. If your coin sticks, that's your first big clue. The second key is color. Steel can naturally turn dark or black over decades, exactly like the shade on the coin you describe. And third, weight. Steel pennies weigh about 2.7 grams, compared to the 3.11 grams of bronze. And remember, even damaged, scratched, or aged errors still bring massive value, because the rarity is incredibly extreme. So yes, your 1944 black shade, fine condition penny could be one of those dream coins hiding in plain sight. And trust me, collectors will pay shocking amounts to own one of these wartime mistakes. Now, let's move on to a coin that looks innocent, almost ordinary, but hides one of the most shocking secrets in the entire Lincoln Wheat Penny series. I'm talking about the 1935 penny. And in fine condition, your coin tells a long story. The softness in Lincoln's hair, the gentle wear across the cheek and jawline, the wheat stalks on the back showing honest age. This is a coin that has lived through the Great Depression, World War II, and more than 8 decades of American history. But don't let the simple look fool you, because the 1935 wheat penny has some rare varieties and errors that can explode in value. Even when the coin looks well worn, your fine condition example shows clear legends, a readable date, and just enough detail to make the fields look original. This is exactly the kind of condition where hidden errors slip by unnoticed for years. And trust me, the 1935 year holds one error so surprising that collectors will pay staggering amounts to secure one. Let's set the stage. In 1935, the U.S. Mint was working hard to keep up with demand after the worst years of the Depression. Machines ran long hours, dyes were overused, and quality control wasn't as strict as we see today. Because of that, several rare minting mistakes were created, some so dramatic that they now belong to the six-figure club. One of the most famous errors from this year is the 1935 double die obverse. On this variety, the date, the word liberty, and the phrase "In God We Trust" show dramatic doubling, thick, strong, bold impressions that jump out at you. And here's the shocking part: even worn examples, even dark, scratched, or fine-grade coins, can sell for life-changing prices. A confirmed 1935 double die in low grades can reach $12,000 to $20,000, while nicer examples easily climb beyond $80,000. The rarest high-grade pieces? They have sold in the $350,000 to $500,000 range, when the doubling is bold and undamaged. That's $500,000 for a penny. But that's not the only power the 1935 penny holds. There are also off-center strikes, tilted dies, early die break varieties, and even wrong planchet errors. These pieces sometimes show raised metal lines, cracks, or strange distortions around the rim. And because the 1930s minting process wasn't perfectly consistent, many small errors slip through unnoticed. A dramatic off-center with clear date can hit $5,000 to $15,000. A wrong planchet 1935 penny extremely rare can rocket beyond $200,000 depending on the metal it was struck on. What makes the 1935 penny so dangerous and so exciting is that many of these errors remain hidden in fine condition coins, exactly like the one you described. When a coin is heavily circulated, doubling can soften, die cracks can blend into the worn fields. A wrong planchet strike might only reveal itself through weight or color, and that's where collectors can easily miss something priceless. Your coin, with its fine grade and even wear, is exactly the sort of piece an inexperienced collector might toss aside. But a serious collector looks closer. A flashlight, a magnifier, and a slow, careful look at the numbers and letters can reveal doubling or distortions that could turn the simple 1935 penny into a lottery ticket. So yes, even in fine condition, the 1935 penny remains one of the most thrilling years to investigate. It carries a sense of mystery, an air of what if, and the real possibility that a tiny mistake made nearly 90 years ago could still be sitting in your hand, waiting to be discovered. Moving on to our next discovery, we arrive at a coin that many collectors think they already understand, but very few truly do. Your 1945D Lincoln Wheat Penny, in bad condition, may look like nothing more than a worn-out piece of copper. The surface is dark, the details are soft, the fields show heavy wear, and the edges have lived through decades of handling. A coin like this usually ends up at the bottom of a jar or tossed into a box of junk pennies that nobody pays attention to. But the 1945D is a coin that deserves a very, very close look. Because this year, especially from the Denver Mint, hides some of the most surprising and high-value wartime errors ever discovered. Let's take a moment to understand the story behind it. This penny was struck during the final year of World War II. The U.S. Mint was pushing out coins as fast as it could. Machines were old, dies were overused, and quality control was not what we expect today. As soldiers were returning home and industry was shifting back to peacetime production, Strange things begin happening at the mint. Things that today create some of the most valuable pennies ever found. Your 1945D, even in bad condition, shows the classic signs of long circulation. Lincoln's hair melted into the field, the cheek and jaw worn flat, and the wheat stalks on the reverse barely visible. The rim might show bumps, scratches, maybe even discoloration. But here's the shocker: bad condition does not remove the possibility of huge value. In fact, many major 1945D errors remain extremely valuable even when the coin looks rough. One of the most shocking varieties for this year is the 1945D over S mintmark error. This happened when a die meant for the San Francisco Mint was repurposed for Denver, leaving traces of an S underneath the D even when this error appears on heavily worn coins. Collectors lose their minds because it is so extremely rare. A damaged example can still reach $5,000 to $15,000, while a cleaner one can surpass $40,000. The highest grade examples push deep into six figures, with estimates soaring toward $250,000 to $300,000. But that's just the beginning. The 1945D also has dramatic die break errors, sometimes called cuds, where a chunk of the die broke off and left raised metal blobs on the coin. These can appear near the rim, across the reverse wheat stalks, or even near Lincoln's portrait. A major die break, even on a heavily circulated coin, can bring $3,000 to $25,000 depending on size and placement. The larger the cud, the more collectors fight over it. Now here comes the real lightning strike: wrong planchet errors from 1945D. These are some of the rarest pennies in the entire wheat series. A few examples were struck on foreign planchets or leftover experimental metal discs. These coins can weigh less or more than normal, appear darker or lighter, and sometimes show unusual edges. These mistakes, tiny, almost impossible to detect without close examination, can explode in value. A genuine wrong planchet 1945D can range from $75,000 all the way up to $450,000 plus, depending on metal type and condition. Even a rough, beat-up example can still sell for a shocking price, because rarity matters far more than appearance, and this is why your coin, in bad condition, still matters. Collectors love 1945D errors because they are unpredictable. They show up suddenly in rolls, in inherited collections, in dusty jars that haven't been touched in 40 years. And because most people dismiss low-grade pennies, the most valuable examples often go unnoticed for decades until an experienced eye takes a closer look. Now, let's move on to a coin that almost everyone overlooks, a coin so common looking that most people would walk right past it without a second glance. Your 1950s Lincoln Wheat Penny, in no fine, heavily worn condition, is exactly the type of coin that hides the biggest surprises. The fields are dull, the lettering is fading, Lincoln's hair has almost melted into the background, and the wheat stalks on the back might be barely visible. Most collectors would simply toss it in a cheap, bulk wheat penny bag. But that's where the story gets interesting. Because the 1950s holds some of the most underrated, most shocking errors in the entire post-war era. Let's begin with what this coin represents. The year 1950 was the beginning of America's economic boom after World War II. Production was fast, demand was high, and the San Francisco Mint, marked by that little s under the date, was under serious pressure to pump out millions of coins. When things move fast at the mint, mistakes happen. And 1950s mistakes aren't just minor. Some of them are jaw-dropping. Even in rough, no fine condition, your coin still carries the full outline of Lincoln's portrait. The fields look stressed, the color may have darkened over decades, and the rim might be smooth from thousands of hands passing it around. A coin like this has lived a full life, and somewhere along that journey, an extremely rare minting error may be hiding beneath the wear. One of the most famous surprises of the 1950s penny is the repunched mint mark, often called the RPM. During this time, mint marks were punched into the die by hand, and sometimes the worker misaligned the S, causing it to be stamped more than once. Some RPMs show the S shifted slightly to the north, east, or west. Others show a strong secondary S punching through underneath the main one. Even in rough condition, collectors love these varieties because they tell the story of mint workers manually correcting mistakes on the dies. A strong RPM variety can still sell for $150 to $600 in low grade, and well over $10,000 to $25,000 in higher grades. Rare ones push beyond $75,000, but the real explosion comes from the ultra-rare 1950S over SSSS varieties triple-punched mint marks. These mistakes are so extreme that collectors treat them like treasures. A heavily worn example still finds buyers willing to pay $3,000 to $9,000, and mid-grade versions rocket past $40,000 to $75,000. The largest, boldest spreads have sold for over $150,000, with rumors of private sales reaching $300,000 plus in premium sets. That's not all. The 1950S also has off-metal planchet strikes, where pennies were accidentally struck on leftover foreign coins the mint was producing at the time. Some were struck on planchets meant for coins of Cuba, Mexico, or even Panama, which the U.S. Mint assisted with during this period. These wrong planchet 1950S pennies are extreme rarities, and even with heavy wear, they can still bring $75,000 to $250,000. High-grade, authenticated examples. Those can push past $500,000, making them some of the most valuable wheat pennies ever found. And here's the shocking part. Wrong planchet errors often look completely ordinary at first glance. They blend in. They survive circulation. They get ignored because people think, oh, it's just a beat-up penny. But these coins can weigh slightly differently, maybe lighter, maybe heavier, and they often show strange color tones, reddish, yellowish, or even grayish. Exactly the kind of unusual color you might notice on a worn 1950S like yours. Now, let's turn our attention to a coin from the mid-1950s, a year many collectors take for granted, but one that hides some of the most shocking and unexpected minting mistakes ever recorded. Your 1956 Lincoln Wheat Penny, in bad condition, is exactly the type of coin most people ignore. The surface looks worn down, Lincoln's cheek and jaw are smooth, the hair blends into the field, and the wheat stalks on the reverse might be barely visible. The color may be darkened by time, scratches may cover the surface, and the rim might have lost its crisp edges decades ago. But don't let this worn appearance fool you, because 1956 is one of those years that can produce unbelievable value if the right error is hiding under that damage. The 1950 seconds were a period of high speed production at the U.S. Mint. Machines were running fast, dies were out quickly, and quality control sometimes struggled to keep up. And when production numbers rise, so does the chance of mistakes. Some of those mistakes from 1956 turned into legendary rarities. Your penny, even in bad condition, carries the full character of a coin that saw years of circulation. It probably passed through hundreds of hands, lived through the early years of the Cold War, survived the switch from silver coins in the 1960s, and somehow found its way to you today. And during that journey, it may have been hiding something that only a careful eye could ever notice. One of the biggest reasons collectors hunt 1956 pennies is the repunched mintmark RPM varieties, especially the D over D errors on the 1956D. These occur when the mint worker punched the D mintmark more than once in slightly different positions. Even extremely worn examples, coins with heavy damage, still command real, shocking value. A rough low-grade RPM 1956D can bring $75 to $250, while mid-grade examples jump to $1,000, and the strongest bold RPMs have sold for $20,000 to $45,000. In high mint state grades, the most dramatic RPMs have reached $75,000 to $150,000. But that's just the warm-up. The real shockers come from double die errors. While not as common as the famous 1955 double die, the 1956 double dies, especially those with strong spread on Liberty or in God, we trust, are extremely valuable. These coins can show thick, shadow-like doubling around the letters and numbers. In worn condition, the doubling may look faint, blended, or softened, but it still matters. A strong doubled die in bad condition can still sell for $5,000 to $15,000, while sharper examples leap into the $40,000 to $120,000 range. The rarest confirmed varieties push beyond $200,000, especially when found with clean fields and strong spread. But the biggest value bomb of all, the kind that turns collectors pale, comes from wrong planchet 1956 pennies. The U.S. Mint in the 1950s produced coins for several foreign nations, including planchets of different metals and weights. Every once in a great while, a leftover foreign planchet ended up under the Lincoln die. A 1956 penny struck on a foreign metal might look grayish, yellowish, unusually light, unusually heavy, or just off compared to normal copper coins. Even heavily worn, these oddball pieces are monsters in the marketplace. A confirmed 1956 wrong planchet strike can bring $75,000, $150,000, $250,000, and in rare cases of uncommon metals, private sales have pushed close to $500,000. Now, we move on to one of the most misunderstood coins in the entire Wheat Penny series, the 1944D Lincoln Wheat Penny, and yours is in bad condition. At first glance, your coin looks like something anyone would toss into a junk drawer or a 1-cent bin at a flea market. The surface is dull, maybe darkened from age, with scratches, bumps, and wear that has flattened Lincoln's cheek and softened the wheat ears on the back. The D mint mark may even look faint or distorted from years of circulation. But this simple, worn-out little coin carries one of the biggest what-if mysteries in American coin collecting. And if the right error is hiding inside your coin, even in terrible condition, the value can skyrocket into life-changing territory. To understand why this coin is so thrilling, we have to go back to the end of World War II. The mint had just finished the famous 1943 steel penny run the year before. Millions of steel pennies were struck to save copper for the war effort. But in 1944, the mint returned to copper, and this is where things got messy. A few leftover steel planchets from 1943 accidentally got mixed into production lines in 1944. And at the Denver Mint, this created one of the rarest, most shocking pennies ever discovered. This is the legendary 1944D steel penny, a coin so rare that only a small handful exist. And here's the heart-stopping truth. A genuine 1944D steel penny, even in terrible condition, even scratched or bent, can be worth $250,000 to over $450,000. High-grade examples? They've sold for more than $1 million. Now, I'm not saying your coin is one of those, but this is exactly why every 1944D, even a bad one, deserves careful attention. Your coin being in poor shape doesn't eliminate the possibility of rare errors. In fact, most major error coins circulated heavily because nobody knew they were special when they were first released. Your 1944D may have unusual color, strange weight, or steel-like magnetic pull if it's one of the ultra-rare off-metal strikes. Even a slight difference in tone, a grayish tint, instead of copper red, can hint at something massive. But the steel error isn't the only jackpot tied to 1944D. This year also produced dramatic repunched mint marks, where the D was punched into the die twice. On a worn coin, this can look like a shadow, a bump, or a strange doubling around the mint mark. Even rough examples can bring $200 to $2,000, while stronger varieties in moderate grades climb beyond $25,000, and the most dramatic RPMs approach $75,000 to $100,000. There are also notable die breaks, sometimes forming thick raised lines or blobs along the rim or across Lincoln's portrait. Collectors love large cuds, and even worn ones can bring $1,000 to $10,000, with bigger dramatic ones reaching $20,000 plus. And we can't forget off-center strikes. A 1944D struck 20-40 off-center with the visible date can easily sell for $5,000 to $15,000, even in rough condition. The more dramatic the shift, the higher the price. But here's what makes the 1944D especially exciting. A major error on this coin does not need good condition. A steel planchet, a double mint mark, a wrong metal, a giant cud. All of these sell based on rarity, not beauty. Your coin's bad condition actually tells a story. It lived through decades of use, passed through hands during a time when people weren't looking at mint marks or planchet metals. If there's an error here, it survived because nobody recognized it. The 1954D Lincoln Wheat Penny is one of those coins that many collectors overlook, especially when it comes in low grade or worn condition. Most people see a brown, faded coin with scratches and think it has no value at all. But that's the biggest mistake beginners make, because with this date and mint mark, the value depends on much more than just condition. Even a coin that looks ordinary can sometimes hide something rare. When you pick up a 1954D Wheat Penny, the first thing to remember is that this coin was struck at the Denver Mint, a facility that produced over 251 million examples. With a mintage that high, a regular circulation strike in bad condition usually sells for just a few cents. But collectors in the hobby know this coin can become valuable when it contains mint errors, striking issues, or unique die characteristics that survived even on low-grade coins. Even in bad condition, you should always begin by looking at the mint mark. The D on Denver pennies from the early 1950s is known for having several repunched mint mark varieties. So even if the coin is dark, scratched, or worn down, bring it close to bright light or use a magnifier to see if the D looks doubled, shadowed, or slightly shifted. A true repunched mint mark on a 1954D can raise the value from a few cents to several dollars, and in some seller markets, even higher if the RPM is strong and visible. The coin doesn't need to be in perfect condition for the RPM to be collectible. Clarity of the variety is what matters. Another thing to look for is the strength of the date. On many 1954D pennies, the number 1 or 9 can show signs of doubling or distortion from die wear. Even though your coin is not fine condition, some of these markers survive surprisingly well. A double date, even in worn shape, becomes far more desirable to variety collectors. Wheat penny enthusiasts often chase these small details because they want to fill variety slots in their albums. Next, study Lincoln's portrait. On bad condition, 195D pennies. The cheek, jawline, and beard area often show heavy smoothing, but you want to check for any unusual metal flow, striking weakness, or signs of a misaligned die. A misaligned die can make one side of the coin appear slightly off-center. And while minor misalignment is common, a more dramatic example where the obverse shifts noticeably can make the coin worthy of attention. Collectors appreciate genuine mint striking flaws because they're created at the mint, not through circulation damage. Then turn the coin over to the reverse. The wheat stalks are usually the first details to flatten out on a low-grade penny, but sometimes the spacing between the lettering 1 cent and United States of America shows characteristics of a late-stage die break. Look for extra metal, raised bumps, or cracks connecting the letters. A die crack, even a small one, increases interest. A die chip inside a letter like a filled O, E, or D can also add value because these varieties are easy to identify and fun for collectors to hunt. One of the most important things to look for on heavily circulated wheat pennies is the rim. A 1954D with a noticeable die break on the rim, erased, an even bump or line can stand out. These rim cuds or partial cuds can increase the desirability of the coin dramatically. Even in bad condition, a strong rim cud can transform a common penny into a coin someone will pay good money for. Even though your specific 1954D penny is in no fine condition, that alone does not disqualify it from being collectible. Errors and varieties survive in all conditions. That's why experienced collectors still study low-grade coins carefully. They know these coins came from real circulation, real history, and sometimes contain features that escape the mint unnoticed. While a regular worn 195 for 1954D may sell for only a few cents. An RPM, double detail, strong die crack, or a noticeable striking error can push the value into the range of several dollars or more, depending on the demand and visibility of the error. So don't ignore your 1954D penny just because it lacks shine or sharp detail. These circulated pieces can still hold hidden value, especially if you take the time to study them. Every wheat penny tells a story, and even a bad condition 1954D can become a surprising discovery in a collection.